Hello, ladies. I am here today with Lauran Thomas for Kitchen Conversations. She's going to be talking to everybody who has adult children who are struggling with different things. But before we get into that conversation, and this is so appropriate for the time, I was talking to a woman last night who is struggling in her marriage because she said it's like living with a roommate. And I know that you have an upcoming event. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, thanks. And hey, I'm glad to be back. It's been a few months. Yeah, I am going to be back in Virginia in the latter part of July, and I'm putting on it's called Marriage Matters workshop. And we're going to be looking at, I'm a Gottman level 3 trained therapist. And so what I use when I do couples therapy is Gottman method. And so I'm going to be taking a lot of that information and being able to kind of disseminate it in a 3-hour workshop on looking at our friendships and looking at our connections and how to have a more deep personal relationship with our spouse, and looking at what those struggles are and how do we develop that. We either create it or recreate it if it's been lost. So July 25th from 3 to 6 in Springfield. And so you can go to my website and that's how you register. So I'm super excited. It's fun to be able to start putting these back on in person.
Yeah, I know coming out of COVID, probably a lot of people right now, from what I've been hearing, could definitely benefit from that. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we have lots of questions that have come to us pertaining to your adult children, ladies. So we'll kick it off because I know you're short on time today. But one of the first ones was, how can you support your child without enabling them? And this came in a lot of different forms. Some people were saying, when do I speak? When do I hold back? Another person came from the perspective of, their child's dealing with a mental health issue, such as bipolar. Somebody else said, is it manipulation or is it a big struggle? So can you touch on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, well, and just to kind of throw out there, I am a parent of adult kids. So I feel like I walk this road, and it's a fine line. And sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't. So I can empathize with, like, how do we do that in a way that, like, continues to foster the relationship with our adult children? How can we let go of that role of being the caretaker, being the provider, and just meet them where they are and be able to provide some, just not really friendship, but what we really want to think about is, like, how can I just be in relationship with you where you are and the way you see the world, and not imposing what I think might be right for your life or how you should be living your life. Because that puts tension in the relationship when we do that. And so as a parent, that's really hard, right? Because for all the formative years, we've been, like, training them up. And so our opinion actually did matter, and it had a place. And now as they're adults, it's almost like our opinion matters, but only if they ask for it. And so that's kind of one of the really difficult balances. And that word enabling, I talk with people all the time about, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And there's lots of ways to look at enabling. Boundaries with our adult children is paramount for the relationship to be healthy. And so when our children are leaning on us, adult children, and I want to preface, we are talking about children who are not under our our roofs as 18 and under. Even though that word 18 is in there, our kids start saying, oh, I'm an adult now. I'm an adult now. Okay, so if that's where your child is, regardless if it's 18 or 25, then we have to shift the relationship. So if they want to be treated like an adult, then we have to give them the responsibilities of an adult, which means we can't take them over. Oh my goodness, my child lost their job and they're in a financial hardship. What would be some natural consequences? If they want to be an adult, that's not my responsibility anymore. Love them, help them find supports, encourage them, help them write their resume, but paying their rent, not really my responsibility as a parent. So you're muted, Michelle. There we go.
Sorry, this is so good because I know people that are saying, their adult child doesn't even talk to them, yet they're still paying their adult child's cell phone bill, right? And so, It's a fine line. But interesting. They want to be treated as an adult.
Yeah, there's so many things we can do to be a support. And so it's like, oh, making time to talk. That's awesome. Like finding space and time within our relationship with them, using like, I statements. We talk about that all the time. But when our kids are making choices that don't align with our beliefs and values, if we start saying, well, you shouldn't have done that, you got yourself into this mess. Oh my goodness. Are we building that relationship? That's so blaming and accusatory. And who would want to hear that? And who would want to be in a relationship with someone who is doing that to them? And so it's going, okay, I want to be in relationship with them. And then going, okay, allow for space, right? They might need emotional space to process. They might throw their baggage on you, which that happens. I experienced that. And then we have to not carry their baggage. That's not our responsibility to carry it. We can't control if they throw it on us. Oh my gosh, this just happened to me, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And what do we do as a parent? We're like, how can I fix it? My baby's hurting. Well, your baby's hurting because they're not making wise choices. And so then we need to give them space to process that and let them ask us for our input. And that helps with that enabling, right? Because when we go in to fix, we're enabling. When they ask for our like recommendations or our, feedback, that's relationship. And so there's a difference there. Encouraging a healthy lifestyle, right? That's a way that's not enabling. Hey, I'm going out for a walk today. Would you like to join me? Hey, I'm planning to do some food prep. You want to bring your groceries over and do food prep with me, right? Or would you like me to come into your kitchen and we do food prep? Like those types of things. But it's like, hey, let's share in this, not let me do it for you. Not, oh, I cooked 4 crock pot meals and I froze them for you. Let me come put them in your freezer. We're not wanting to do that. That's enabling, right? And there's a difference there. One of the part of your questions was like, they're dealing with a mental health issue. So that looks a little different, and so again, I'm kind of talking globally because I don't know if the adult child is living at home. I don't know if the adult child is getting support already. But one of the things I encourage parents to do when their adult childs have mental health issues is to, how can I support without enabling? Oh, that might look like some financial support to get them in treatment. So if you have the means and you can pay for therapy or get them into a psychiatrist or figure out transportation for them to get to a day program or appointments that they need to get to. That's not enabling, right? Because if someone has a mental health issue, we need them to get help so that they can then become independent. And a young adult with mental health issues doesn't have the capacity to be independent without those support networks established. And so there's a difference there with mental health versus just a young adult who doesn't want to have responsibility. And so in that, it's like, okay, looking at how we can engage mental health. Oh, right. So we don't want to do some things like we don't want to be pushy, right? That's not going to help them get themselves into any types of treatment. We want to be mindful not to be passing blame. We want to really be mindful for like not making assumptions. We want to look for like, oh, what are some of the cues that my adult child is not doing well? And so then we can go, okay, I think they're kind of in a depressive state. So when someone's in a depressive state, what do I do? Okay, that's when I ask them to join me for things. That's when I go over and I might say, hey, it looks like we haven't done laundry in a while. Would you like some help with that? So it's joining in their hardship when you see them struggling. Let's say we have someone who might have a mood disorder, bipolar, then we're wanting to really look for those cues, manic episodes versus depressive episodes. And when we find them in the neutral state, that's when we want to get them into treatment. because it's hard to get someone who's manic or depressive actually into treatment. So we want to find the place when they are in a more calm, neutral state to help them get into treatment. One of the things with mental health is we want to be really careful as a parent not to be venting about our stress, because that actually causes someone with mental health issues to potentially own that stress, and it does not support their mental health. That actually can harm it. And so if you're finding yourself stressed out, work to talk with someone outside of that adult child. And even if they're in earshot, right? So sometimes it's like a mom and a dad, like, oh my gosh, today was just so difficult. He wouldn't get out of bed all day, and he's just, okay, we want to be careful not to do that where they can, because the earshot then starts the self beat up. That's where they start going, well, I'm not worth anything, right? And so it's really not supporting them in that space. Coping and balance, right? Like looking like for current treatment approaches that might be good, right? So if your adult child's been in treatment, what if it's not working? What if there's no improvement in their life? Like we call them ADL, so adult living skills. And so if you're not seeing that your young adult's able to actually like engage in those typical adult living skills and they're in some form of treatment, I kind of compare it to like, I take every mental health thing and I connect it to like a medical and go, okay, so if you had diabetes and the insulin wasn't helping you regulate, you would probably seek a second opinion. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with mental health. If you've been in treatment and it's not supportive and it's not improving your daily function, it doesn't mean that that person you're seeing or that style is bad or wrong. It's just not working for you. So it's totally okay to go seek out other supports. There's lots of different styles of mental health support. So try something new if the one you're doing is not working. You're seeing a psychiatrist. Medication's not working. You can go to a different one. It's like saying there's not an alliance that we in the mental health field, okay, and a healthy mental health worker, there's not, I want my clients to get the best care possible. And if it's not me, then let me help you find something different.
That's a really good point. I appreciate that. I think that's going to really speak to the people who had a lot of those questions. We also had people, their kids were dealing with trauma too. Some had children who had been raped, and how do they help them through those circumstances?
Wow, trauma is big, and trauma is a overarching. What we do know about processing trauma is that it's super individualized, and that the needs of the person are the only way to determine how we move forward. So some people can go through a traumatic event and they can utilize probably healthy coping skills that they had before the traumatic event, and in a trusting relationship be able to process that and share it, and they might be able to walk through it without having professional help. Another person, that might not be the case. And so I think if you're a parent of someone who's had trauma, then encourage you to be an active listener. Remind yourself that the feelings that they might be expressing are not personal and they're not directed at you. But when trauma happens, most of the time there's big emotion that can come out. And I think we as loved ones can sometimes take that as directed at us. But the regulation of a person, the emotional regulation of a person who's had trauma is it's dysregulated. And so we have to be available for them if we can, to allow that person to just feel, and realize that we can't correct the feeling. Some of the options for getting help are their support groups. For basically, for many types of trauma, there's specific focused support groups. And so looking for that, whatever your child has experienced, helping them find a space where they don't feel alone in their experience is really helpful. Individual counseling so that they can just have a space of process, because with trauma, we need space to process it, so that we can look at what we might be writing the story about, the why and the how and the what. And so that can be looked at. There is creative arts counseling, which is really good for trauma. And then I've talked about before EMDR, which is a trauma-based specific therapy, which is really good. And you can just Google EMDR therapy and find a therapist in your area that does that kind of work. And now that COVID is lifting and we're getting to go back in person, that type of therapy is they have been talking about how virtual with EMDR is really hard. And so I'm super glad to know that now people are going to be able to be doing that in person again. When trauma's happened, one of the things we can do as parents is encouraging good self-care. And so, are they eating? Are they sleeping? Are they getting outside of the house and moving? Are they attempting to maintain any type of regular relationships? So we're not there to push those things on them. We're there to encourage those things. And if they refuse, there's nothing we can do as a parent, except just continuing to be that love and that relational space for them to feel safe.
And I think in one of these circumstances too, like the mom even found out a separate way, like the daughter didn't tell her that, she'd been raped. She found out in, another way. And so then too, when your child is kind of like keeping things from you that you obviously know the hurting from, because you see that in their life. Yeah. How do you?
Yeah. So when there's a secret, that's a secret, right? So the mom has information that the daughter hasn't chosen to share. Mm-hmm. And so now there's a secret. One of the things, there's a good organization called NAMI, which is National Alliance of Mental Illness, I believe. But it's a resource for mental health. So that is NAMI.org, but I can put that in later. But that is a great place for support. And so knowing that you might not be able to be the support that your daughter needs, but that you can get your own support as you walk through this road. I would say being really mindful and aware of depression. And so you can notice, and that's one of the big words I use with adult children, is I've noticed, right? It's stating facts, not assumptions. Hey, I've noticed that you haven't really been hanging with your friends, or I've noticed that you've been missing work. I'm here for you. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to support you. Or I've noticed that you've been really tearful lately and I'm just not sure what's going on. Would you like to talk about it? And so it's really allowing to say, I know you, right? You're my child and I know you, and something's different. And so your child might choose to talk to you about the trauma. They might not, but to know that they've been seen in their hurt might open up a door at some point with you or with someone else. And so I think just allowing them to be seen. There is another good resource, right? A parent, I'm thinking about this parent specifically, right? I've got this knowledge. How hard that must be, that I've got knowledge of harm and hurt that my child's gone through, and I can't talk about that openly yet. But there is a domestic and sexual violence hotline, and that might be a resource for this parent. They could call, and that is a very specific, these crisis counselors work with this topic. And so they might have more resources to help. Sometimes it might be even an encouragement of going to, talk to someone because you've noticed depression, even though you don't talk about the rape with your child. That might be an option. I think being available is probably the best. I mean, again, I'm sitting here with a heavy heart going when you know something and you can't really talk about it. But what we do know about trauma is anger comes out at times. And so be mindful that if there is anger, there's lots of triggers, especially when it comes to rape, that you might have to be mindful of. This person might not want to be alone. They might be really scared of the dark. And so if you have this knowledge, you can not make them feel judged in that. And again, I've noticed that you've been leaving the light on when you're sleeping. Do you want to talk about that? You know, is there something going on, or could we get you a nightlight that might be more comfortable for? I mean, really engage it, and I guess in that, not walking away from the things that you actually see just because you have a knowledge of a secret.
That's a good one. Thank you for those suggestions. I like that. I noticed that's really, non-threatening and a great way to open the conversation for what they might want to share with you. Things like when your child's calling you and maybe they're in a different state, maybe you don't even live close to them and they're threatening suicide. That's something women are dealing with. What could help them with that?
That's an interesting one that I'm going to probably take two sides on that, because I take suicide seriously every time, all the time. I don't ever say, that's just manipulation. They're just trying to get me to, they're sucking me in. I don't ever do that with suicide. But what I do is I actually talk about the suicide. So it sounds like you're really hurting right now and that you don't see any other ways out. Help me know what you're thinking, what you're going through right now. Openly talk about it. The one thing with suicide is we don't want to minimize it. And we also don't want to ignore it in terms of like, well, you need to go talk to a counselor. They're calling you. And so having some kind of open-ended questions, if this is happening on a regular, having some open-ended questions that you just ask so that you don't get drawn into the emotion of it. I mean, because how scary, right? How scary that is. Your child calls and says, it's just not worth it anymore. I don't even want to be here. I mean, that produces an emotion in you as a parent. I mean, it produces emotion in me, and I'm not the parent of this person. And so I have to be mindful not to let my emotion get sucked in. And so when I can be prepared, because it's happened before. So prepare myself for, an active listener. Sounds like you might want to talk. Do you want to share anything with me? What's been going on that's gotten you to this place? And then I'm also probably going to talk about what the means are. Like, is there something that you have right there in front of you that you're going to use? I might say, hey, can we get on a FaceTime call? Right? I might get them on video versus audio, because then I can see a little more. If they have a support network, if they have a counselor, I'm going to work hard with that person to, because they're adults, we have to have releases of confidentiality to speak with a counselor. So I'm going to try to encourage them. The next time you go to your counselor, can you please give me a release to speak with them? I want to be on your team of support, right? And so trying to get that team created for them is really important. If you really feel your child or anyone is going to act on it, right? I mean, if you're not sure, you call 911, and you give them the address and you give them the occurrence. And I know as a parent, you might worry that that's going to ruin the relationship. Well, if they kill themselves, you will not have a relationship. And that's hard language to hear, but it would be better for them to be angry at you and be alive than for them not to be here anymore.
Right.
Because we can get through anger, but we can't change death.
Right. I like how you address it, because I feel like it's those things that scare us that we want to like push away from. And really it's like the wisdom of embrace it and discuss it, and maybe what is causing the pain, right? Because that's such a good reminder of what to say.
And there's some really, the suicide hotline has a website, and there's some really good questions on there that, and that's another thing. It's like being prepared. If you are dealing with someone who is, we call it suicidal ideation, right? Where it's just mulling around with them often. It's really good to find yourself some engagement questions, how to ask open-ended questions, how to reflect what you hear, how to actually learn how to reflect the emotion that you hear, because you can hear an angry tone and the words can be like, that's not worth it anymore. If you can learn how to go to the emotion of what you're hearing, man, you seem really hurt and upset right now, or I can just hear that things aren't going well for you. And you can go there versus like, you sound so angry right now. It really does open up that door differently for them to feel cared for.
Thank you for that one. I know we're short on time, and I have all these questions of the ladies that I want to ask you still. How do you handle their blame towards you when they're in a state of blaming you for things?
Seek to understand and remind yourself understanding doesn't mean agreeing, right? So when our kids, especially our adult kids, like if you hadn't done this, I wouldn't be this way, right? Like, or I mean, a divorce comes up a lot in this one. If you and dad had just stayed together, then I wouldn't have all these problems, right? I know that must be really hard for you. Help me understand what you're going through. I'm not owning the responsibility of their feelings right there. I'm also not agreeing that the divorce caused it. But I am asking to understand more. Let me into your life a little bit more. One of the things that's really hard for us as parents is this idea of like attempting to see the world through their eyes. And remembering that like when we say things like, in my day, this would, and we do that doesn't help. We would have just like, don't do that, like whatever symbol you need, don't do that. But like, so it's this idea of like, help me understand what it's like to be 25 right now. Like, I have no idea what that's like. And it seems like the way you're talking to me right now, that must be uncomfortable or hard or, and go with that, right? Like that is a deeper understanding of their space and their world. And that's also going to help you understand their choices, right? Because if being 25 for them is so hard because everything's on technology and that, it is a 25-year-olds have this like, immediate gratification. Our world is doing that. That's not because this one person is doing that, right? This is a cultural and generational issue. And so I think sometimes as parents, if we can really go, oh, wait, they are walking 25 in a different world than I walked 25.
Yeah, I wasn't 25 in a pandemic where everybody was isolated. So,
right.
What's that like?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is like, if we're really seeking to have this relationship, right? That's what I really push. Like we are wanting to be in relationship with our adult children. And if we're wanting to, then one of the things is like being raw, authentic, vulnerable, like admitting our flaws, admitting our own disappointments, acknowledging when we made poor choices or poor decisions, recognizing that like I get that my choice to go back to work when you were 12, I get that was really hard for you. And I don't know if it's a poor choice, but it's definitely something that I look at. Right? Like, I mean, that's like, I'm being honest there. Like, I can't tell you that when you say, if you had never gone back to work, then, I would have, right? What I'm just using that as an example, but I don't know if that's true or not, but I can recognize, yeah, I went back to work when you were 12 and I can see how having had me there for 12 straight years and then me not being there, you might have felt a little abandoned in that space. Right? And so then we're talking about it and acknowledging they actually have real hurt. And I can't change that. I don't know if it was a good choice or a bad choice, but it was the choice that was made. The last thing I think is important here is like when we're vulnerable and open, sometimes it causes a trust issue if our child is belittling, nasty, condescending. Okay, I'm not asking you to be vulnerable and open when your boundaries are being crossed. So if you have someone who is crossing your boundaries by verbally attacking you, physically attacking you, or that belittling space, you can set a boundary and say, I am open to talk to you and I can recognize you're hurting, but I'm going to have to walk away because the way you're talking to me is causing me to not feel good also. And we can set a boundary there. I'm open to talking with you if we can do it in a respectful way. And so
good point.
It's not just take it.
Yeah. Yes, because sometimes people don't say things in the kindest ways, especially at that age.
Right. Well, and you can say, I just heard them be really disrespectful. Sounds like you'd like to talk to me, and I'd really like to talk to you. I might need to go take a 20-minute break before I can do that because you just made me mad. I don't have to say that, but I can say, hey, I have this other thing, but I'll be back in 20 minutes, and can we resume this conversation? Because I need to get my head clear to be able to be in this conversation with you. Two reactive people,
Not pretty.
It doesn't go well.
Not going anywhere good.
No.
So true. So we'll try to get through a couple more of these real quick. What can you do if you find out your child's using drugs?
Well, I guess one big question to ask yourself, are they living in my home or not living in my home? Because two big distinctions there, in my opinion. Because if they're not living in your home, you can't do anything. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible to say that. You can love them. You can remind them that there are supports. You can choose not to spend time with them if they are high, if they are drunk. You can choose, let's say you're a social, a person who can have a glass of wine at dinner, but you are concerned that your child is an alcoholic. I wouldn't be offering them alcohol at my house. Right. So I can make those kinds of choices if they don't live in my home. But in terms of what can I do in terms of getting them help, a love and support and encouragement and holding firm boundaries so that you're not enabling their poor choices. If they are living in your home, well, then you have some more leverage. Because in my home, we're not going to have addiction. And so if I'm worried that my child is abusing, first I want to try to have some compassion and understanding. And I would want to do that if they weren't living in my home also. But I think I'm trying to get to the gist of like that. What can I do? But there's a space of like compassion, but with firm responses. I can understand that you're self-medicating because you're depressed. Okay, so I can understand that, and I can have knowledge of that. I can recognize that there's a lot of social stressors out there. I can recognize and I can know these things. And in knowing that, I can say, okay, I want to support you. Let's look at what we can do together, because I can't force you. You're an adult. You can't force anyone over the age of 18 into treatment. Most people go into treatment when they've hit rock bottom and there are no other options, right? So that would be that enabling space. There's nowhere else to turn, right? They've lost their job, relationships broken, they don't have friends, right? There's nowhere else to turn. That might be the mindset they need to be in to actually turn to help. And so we as parents have to actually allow them to suffer natural consequences. They get a DUI. I'm probably not bailing them out. I'm probably not paying their legal fees, and I'm probably not going to court with them. They need to handle that on their own. They're an adult, and they made an adult choice, and now they need to suffer the adult consequence.
Mm.
They lose their job, but they owe rent to me because my adult child, unless we've made another arrangement, they're going to have to pay rent to live in my home. Okay, if you can't pay me rent, what would be a natural consequence of that? Well, sometimes there's a barter system. You might actually have to get a job at the house. And you might have to earn your way here, right? And I'm not going to do that without love and compassion, but I'm going to be firm in my love and my compassion, because if I'm not, then I'm enabling the addiction.
Mm.
There's a lot of treatment. And for you as the parent, Al-Anon is a great space of support because it's for the loved ones of addicts. And so you're going to find support in a place like that that says you're not alone, you're not ostracized, you're not responsible,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get a lot of encouragement, because when we are trying to be firm, we're going to need support, because that's one of the hardest things to do if you have to kick your child out of your own home because they're not following the agreed upon rules of living in my home. That's a hard thing to do. You're going to need support around that. Not
Yeah.
that that's what you have to do, but that's just an example.
Yeah. And speaking of support, ladies, we have Moms of Hope. So if you don't know about that, that is for moms with adult children who are going through all sorts of circumstances. They're there to pray with you and just have fellowship together. And it is momsofhope@burkecommunity.com. And you can find out all the details. But I know that's been a huge blessing to so many women, just to know they're not walking that alone. I mean, and those women they've seen everything. So nothing you share with them is going to be new, even though it may be new to you. Do we have time for one more question before you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Last one real quick. Just how do you help your child take responsibility versus continue to rely on you? So we know they need to be responsible, but how do we go about that?
Okay. Well, when they rely on you, they continue to put the responsibility on you. You might have to ask yourself the question, what am I doing to open that door? So I have some ownership. If they are putting it on me and I'm taking it, then I have some ownership there, because we don't get to control if our children say that we're responsible. You should be doing this for me. You're the reason that I'm like this, so now you've got to take this burden for me. They can say that all they want, and we can't stop that. We have to actually look at ourselves and say, oh, okay, how am I keeping my child in this place? And we want our children to emotionally leave the home as well as physically leave the home. That's what we really want for them. And so that means that I have to work to help my child have emotional supports outside of me. Because when they're placing responsibility on you, they're saying, I need help, and you're my emotional responsibility. Like, you take that for me. You've always taken that for me, so I'm still getting it. Like, you're still providing it. And so we really want to kind of start setting some boundaries with that. We can be friendly, we can be loving, but we really want to say, okay, what are the patterns and what's not working for me? And I kind of put this back on the parent, because our children will be children as long as we allow them to be. And that's really hard. It's hard as a parent. Again, I am a parent of adult children, and I had to look at my husband, and I just had to look at this question of, like, we like them to come see us. They typically can't afford to come see us. We typically pay for it. Is that helpful? Right? I mean, and like, we really have to start looking at that. That's like just an easy one to look at, like it's a financial thing. Well, if we keep paying for it, what's going to stop them from letting us pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's the same thing with, like, oh, if we keep carrying the burden of them not being able to get a job because of whatever the reason they're placing on us, they're not going to get a job. Right? And so what we can do is to say, here are the ways I can support you, and here are the ways I cannot support you, and be really clear with that. There's a great resource in Fairfax County, and I know not everyone's in Fairfax County, but there's there's just, you could go on their website, but it's Merrifield Center is right in Fairfax. I forget where it is. I have the address I can give, but especially with mental health, like if you feel like your child is suffering mental health and they don't have any treatment, there is walk-in appointments there. Therapy, psychiatry. There are appointments there where you can work on getting a case manager. There was one question that came, we didn't get a chance to answer it, but I wanted like the long-term care space
Yes.
of a child. I wanted to Maryfield would be the first place I would go. And then I would say any parent who has a child who has a mental health disability, if they've been diagnosed with a mental health disorder and they're not able to function in a way that lets them have a sustainable job, lets them be able to live independently, lets them be able to maintain healthy relationships, then you can apply, 18 or over, you can apply for Social Security benefits for your child so that they can then have an income that can pay for therapy and psychiatry and other things that would help them. And so maybe taking that burden off of you, thinking that you're the only one responsible for that, that there are resources. And so I'm not a social worker. Typically, this is a social worker's role. And so like at Merrifield, they would have social workers that would partner with you to say, what do I need to do? Like, right, I can go in blind with no info, except my child has been diagnosed with bipolar, schizophrenia, psychotic disorders, and they can't function on a typical level as a 25-year-old. They can walk you through the process and get you support.
That's amazing. I so appreciate you coming on today and just sharing all those great resources so that the women have, answers to some of these questions that they've been struggling with. So I know you need to go, and we so appreciate having you, but we look forward to seeing you in July too. So thank you so much.
It will be so much fun. Well, and I'll send you, Michelle, some of the just web links and things like that, because sometimes it's like searching the internet is so overwhelming when you're already overwhelmed with the stress.
Yes. Or just post it on this link below and then they'll have it too.
Oh, okay. I can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lauran. Bye, ladies.
Bye.